Welcome to Empowered by Iron, the podcast for female strength athletes by female strength athletes. We are your hosts, Kristen Lander from Fiercely Fueled Nutrition Coaching and Mary Morton, PhD candidate and weightlifter. Together, we are Empowered by Iron. Hey everyone, welcome to Empowered by Iron. This week, we have a Catalyst weightlifting athlete. Her name is Snow Charpentier. Yeah? Did I say it right this time?
Correct, yeah.
Yes. She is a 53 kilo, but possibly now a 58 kilo weightlifter. She is a graphics designer. She has her own blog, which is actually how we found her, called Weightlifting, or Women Weightlifting, Weightlifting Women?
Weightlifting Woman, yeah.
Weightliftingwomen.com, which is actually how I found her. So I do the website stuff for Empowered by Iron, and I noticed that someone had linked their blog to us, and I went and read it, and it was Snow, and it was talking about some really cool things that we'll get into a little bit later. But that's how we found her, and I was like, holy shit, we have to get this girl on the show. So hey, welcome to Empowered by Iron. We're so excited to have you on.
Oh, thanks. I'm so honored to actually be on this podcast. It's really exciting to hear, like, all of a sudden get a message from you saying, like, hey, we have to have you on. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm actually kind of famous. Sort of.
Well, what I get tired of with a lot of other podcasts is they only bring on really, like, huge names so they can get their podcast out there, which I totally get. Like, you use other people's audiences to grow your audience, whatever. But, like, I'm so obsessed with people's stories and knowing how people got to where they are, even just regular people. That's why I love reaching out to people like you who are like, you're obviously doing really good things in the industry and you are an established lifter, but no one, not saying you're not famous, but...
It's really cool to be able to know, like, there are people in my position who maybe have not gotten, like, a gold medal or anything or set records, but we have aspirations to be awesome one day. And I think just having this shared experience of being in the same mindset or being in that same place, like dealing with your day-to-day work job life, like not having the luxury of only being a full-time weightlifter, like, I think I love being able to share this experience with a lot of you all.
But being a normal person, like a normal human.
A normal person.
Right. So speaking of you being normal, what do you do full-time? So what makes you the money? And if lifting is not your full-time career, and where are you currently located?
Oh yeah, I wish lifting was my full-time thing, but I do have obligations, of course, in the rest of my life. So right now I'm a full-time graphic designer. That's what I went to college for, undergraduate college for. Actually, before I was a designer, I taught high school graphic design for 4 years because I did get a master's of art and teaching at Rhode Island School of Design. But moving out back to Oregon, so I'm actually from Oregon. I lived here most of my life up through high school. And I ended up moving back east. I went to college in St. Louis for graphic design, and then eventually I made my way out to the Boston area. I lived in Providence, Rhode Island for about 6 years, where that's where I got my master's degree, and that's where I was living, and where I met my current husband, actually, at the CrossFit gym there that I joined. So right now it's a typical 8 to 5 desk job. It's a struggle because, I also coach CrossFit at the same time, and I'm always really into making sure you're staying mobile and you're staying flexible. And even though I have a standing desk, I really try to do as much as I can to make sure that my hips are staying flexible. I do yoga stretches every morning, and it's tough to be able to hold this desk job and at the same time go to the gym after work and still getting a lot of training, because I dilute so much of my training and life to all these other different things that I do. So I do graphic design. I actually also am a self-started entrepreneur. And this is just by accident. I run my own Etsy shop and online website selling greeting cards and fitness journals that I designed myself. And it started randomly one day when I sent out Christmas cards to friends and family that had a Santa pushing a sled instead of actually riding the sled. You know, like how in CrossFit people push sleds. So I decided to one day put these on Etsy because somebody recommended that. And they sold like hotcakes. Like, literally people were buying these left and right. And I was making so much side money off of them that I designed a lot more cards. I made like $6,000 or $7,000 in a couple months just from selling these cards, which is kind of crazy. So now I run this constant side hustle all the time where I do freelance work. I sell more and more greeting cards. I also do things like design t-shirts and whatnot. So I do this alongside my full-time graphic design job, alongside doing CrossFit coaching part-time and training.
And what's your design company called?
It's called Power Snow Design. Well, Powers being that used to be my last name prior to getting married. So that's how the name came about. Actually, I just jotted it down one day and didn't think nothing of it. It's kind of a really silly name right now, but I just went with it. And so now I just use it. So.
So your name is Snow, and I noticed on your website it says, "No, my parents are not hippies." So is there a reason behind your name, or just because it's awesome?
Yeah, I get asked that so much. My name is actually Snow White. It used to be Snow White Powers, which is kind of funny. But I was named after the Disney princess Snow White, and my sister, her name is actually Sunshine, so we kind of have this full weather theme going on. But yeah, my mom was really into like the Disney princesses at the time, and so she named me Snow White, and it's just kind of cool. It's like one of my life goals, though, to meet somebody else that has the first name Snow, because I have not yet. It's so weird because whenever I meet people, my name is so memorable that they remember mine, but I can never remember theirs, and so it's kind of awkward. But yeah.
I think that just means you're famous. Yeah. Okay, so you are a competitive weightlifter. Were you always a weightlifter? How did you get into weightlifting?
I think so. No, I was never always a weightlifter, and in fact, I was never actually really athletic for most of my life. I didn't really get into weightlifting or any of this until about a few years ago. So, believe it or not, most of my life up through high school, I was actually a lot chubbier, a lot more overweight than I am now. Like, I think I was around 140 pounds at my heaviest, and I did golf. Like, literally, my sport was varsity golf, and that was just because my dad really got me into it. My sister's actually a better golfer than me, but I was decent enough to, hit in the mid-80s or whatnot for golf. So I did that for most of my career, or high school career. And then after I graduated college, and I was kind of off of my own, I was sort of unhappy with the way I looked after college. I felt really chubby and overweight. My dad actually had passed away because of liver cancer. He was a very big, overweight guy, and I knew that I didn't want the same thing to happen to me. I didn't want, if I had children in the future, to have that happen to my children. I want to make sure that I'm healthy. So I decided to get myself into shape, and it all started with a coworker who was training for a half marathon one day. And he was like, well, you could train for a half marathon too, because all you need to do is follow this 3-month plan. And if you're already running like 3 miles a week or three days a week for 30 minutes, you could run a half marathon in 3 months. So I decided to try it out, and one thing led to another thing. I ran my first half marathon, and then pretty soon I was like, okay, well, I think I can do a marathon. So I ran a marathon, and then I got into triathlon stuff, and literally it was what I thought was the way to get into shape, was to do a lot of running, to do a lot of this long distance stuff. Like, throughout my whole life, I used to be the elliptical for 30 minutes, 3 days a week, and drag myself to the gym, and then I'll be so in shape, and through that, so through triathlon training and whatnot, I actually learned about CrossFit through my triathlon coach. I used to go to the YMCA, and that's where I was training for, cycling classes and swimming and whatnot. And so she introduced me to CrossFit. And it was so intimidating. I remember going to CrossFit Providence for the first time because it's this big, giant warehouse-looking thing with giant garage doors and people flinging around barbells. I didn't even know what a back squat was when I first started. Literally, I had no idea. I think I knew what a deadlift was, but I really didn't know what a back squat was. And so I started my first CrossFit workout. It was something with dumbbell thrusters and running, and we even tested for our first. We tested for our max number of pull-ups we could do. I couldn't even do one. So, but I got hooked. I absolutely love it. I think it brought what was really missing to me in all this endurance running was the strength component of it, building all of this musculature. Because even though I was doing a lot of this running stuff, I was still kind of flabby and whatnot. And I think being introduced to CrossFit and then eventually into the weightlifting movement, that's how I kind of got into all of this.
So how did you make the transition from CrossFit to weightlifting? How did that come about?
Well, I'm a very competitive person, I think, by heart, and I think a lot of it starts from my parents, my mom. So I'm part Asian, and if you know the whole stereotype stigma between Asian parents and always making sure that their kids are always the best at everything. So my mom always wanted me to be the best at everything, and because of that, I think I naturally am very competitive. So when I got to this CrossFit gym and I saw all of these women lifting a lot of this weight, and it was really heavy stuff, of course, I wanted to be just like them. And these women were much bigger than me. I'm a very small person. I'm only not even 5 feet tall. I like to say 5 feet, but I'm small. I'm very short. And I'm trying to compare myself to these women who are 140, 160 pounds, much taller, lifting 95-pound snatches over their head. I'm well, I want to do that one day. So every morning I get so excited about going to CrossFit 5 or 6 days a week and trying to lift more than I did the next day. And, within a year or so, I was pretty decent, I'd say. I wasn't RXing stuff yet, but I was definitely lifting quite a bit. And one of the coaches at the gym who was doing a lot of the programming kind of took note of that. And he's actually, do you know that for your height, what you're lifting right now could actually be setting New England records? I'm what? So he decided to sign me up for this mock weightlifting meet at a local CrossFit gym. And it was actually the day after I did this obstacle course race, a three-mile obstacle course race. And the next day I decided to do this weightlifting meet. I didn't even know how much I weighed then. I just showed up and with full clothes on or whatnot. And apparently I was 52.89 or something strange like that. So I was oh, I'm a 53. I didn't even
zero fucks.
I had no idea what weight classes there were. I just showed up one day and weighed in, and that was it. So apparently I went 6 for 6 actually, and the lifts that I made, and it's always fun going 6 for 6 in a meet because you feel so accomplished. So apparently the lifts that I made were New England records for the 53 class. So then, of course, I signed up for an actual weightlifting meet a couple months later, and I hit the same numbers and all of a sudden set New England records, but also qualified for the American Open. And I actually was going to do a CrossFit a team CrossFit competition the same week, same weekend as the American Open. And my coach was wait, you're going to do a CrossFit meet when you could actually be going to this national level competition and be lifting with all these other high level national athletes. So I made the switch and I decided for the first time. Oh, okay. This is really funny. This was in Dallas, Texas. I remember in 2013. That was the weekend that it had snowed the first time in Dallas, Texas. And I remember making t-shirts to fundraise for the event because it costs a lot of money, of course, to fly there. and the T-shirt said, "Let it snow in Dallas, Texas."
That's awesome.
It actually freaking snowed there. I can't.
So it's your fault.
Shut the whole town down. So I went to my first lifting meet at the American Open. I think I got like 6th place or something. It wasn't that spectacular, but it was really cool because there was all these other like high level like big name athletes. Like Morgan King was there for the first as a 48, and she's like clean and jerk 90 for the first time or something like that. She can do like 110 now. I don't know. And all these other big names, like Kathleen Winters was a 53 then, and who's now like a 48. And it was just like such a cool environment to be there with these other like record setting athletes. And after that, I was hooked. I decided to do weightlifting as my sport because in CrossFit, you're always competing. There's no weight classes. You're always competing with these women who are much bigger than you. And if you can't lift as much, you're probably not going to make it because a lot of what's being a good CrossFitter is being extra strong. Mm-hmm. And although I'm strong for my height and weight in particular, clearly I'm not strong enough to make it to like past the regional level. So I decided that, CrossFit's not for me. I'm decent at CrossFit, but I'm going to switch over to weightlifting because I feel like I actually have something going for me there.
And so how did you then find Greg and Amy? How did you get onto Catalyst?
So my coach at the time who was doing my weightlifting programming, he was doing it based off of Catalyst cycles, and so he would grab a lot of the cycles that were on the Catalyst page at the time, and he would modify them to fit what my needs were. So I was kind of following Catalyst focused programming for a little bit. I think how I actually stumbled upon getting onto the team, I remember at one point where Catalyst had posted that they were moving to Oregon. Like they were closing their commercial gym in California, and they're like, we're going to move to Oregon and we're going to just do things out of our garage. And I was like, wait, I am from Oregon. What if I decided to actually just apply? Because I knew they were looking for lifters who are quite a bit younger, and I'm on the higher end of it, like 28 or 29 right now, is actually at the upper end, I think, for weightlifting. Most athletes coming into the sport are teens and low 20s. But I'm like, I'm just going to, send an email, throw my resume together of, my lifting accomplishments and just see what he says. And this was just right in the middle of, my teaching job one day. I just sent them an email. Within an hour, Greg emails me back and says, oh, I know who you are. Do you want to just, stop by my place one day and just come and lift and see how you feel? And if things work out, then I'd like to have you on the team. I'm like, whoa, really? Was it that simple?
I mean, okay.
Yeah, so it was last year during the summer. They just literally moved out to the middle of nowhere, Oregon. We went out to his place, and his garage gym literally looks like whatever his other gym looked like. It was in the back of a garage, this $1 million house out in the middle of nowhere. And I just lifted in his garage. My husband went with me, and I was like, wow, this is really cool. So I was like, yeah, I'm interested on being on the team. So, and that was it. And out of the sheer goodness of his heart, Greg's been working with me right now remotely. At first, when I was still back out in Rhode Island, before we moved out here, we just send videos back and forth. And that's what he does right now with most of his lifters. A lot of it's remote lifting. We send him videos. He has probably the largest Apple iCloud storage space ever, probably. And I had to actually change my iPhone to send videos. But yeah, we do everything remotely now. And that's how I got started with Catalyst.
So
that's awesome.
That's pretty awesome. Catalyst is one of the pioneer companies in weightlifting. If any of you are listening and have any questions about weightlifting, go check out catalystathletics.com because that's where you learn basically everything. It's the biggest
resource for everything. All the videos that you need. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So how we found you, kind of going back to, Greg knew who you were and we figured out who you were. I wanted to talk about the article specifically that you wrote referencing one of our podcasts called The Dark Side of Being Lean. And in that podcast, we talked about how being lean can negatively affect your health. And you've been going through some of those experiences. You've had that happen to you personally. So why don't you, if you don't mind, talking to us a little bit about that and what's been going on and how you're feeling now?
Absolutely. And I am really glad to be able to kind of share my story, because I feel like a lot of the stuff really doesn't get shared around with the weightlifting community, more so like compared to other sports like, you know, marathon running or gymnastics or dancing or whatnot. So there are a lot of compromises to make when you want to become really good at something, especially in a sport athletically. And the thing with weightlifting is the constant pressure to lift in a certain class, especially knowing that if you're able to cut to make a certain class and you're able to do that, you're going to be much more competitive. The fact that I was being able to lift as a 53, it was really easy for me to actually do that for the first couple years. My weight naturally fell down there after I dropped so much because of all my triathlon training and whatnot. I was a pretty lean person, and I was actually watching my nutrition pretty well. So in order to stay down as a 53, a lot of people looked up to me a lot because I was really into nutrition. Like my husband and I, we both really got into things like the Whole30, the Zone diet. We were really into this whole clean eating aspect. And because of that, a lot of people looked up to me and to what I was doing in order to stay super lean. I was really ripped at the time. I had a six-pack. I was making all these big accomplishments in the gym. And it was really easy for me to stay down as a 53 and to be lifting at these meets. In fact, when a lot of 53 women were cutting to make the 53 class, I would naturally just be like 52. And I'd freak out because I was like 52.9. I'm like, oh my God, I'm not going to make it. And I'd be like 51 at weigh-ins. And I was like the lightest person there. And nowadays, I'm actually at the point where I'm making the cut. I actually train heavier in order to cut down to a 53. Now, because so the reason why I got into weightlifting in the first place, and I think the reason why a lot of people get into a lot of these sports, either weightlifting or marathon running or whatever sport it might be, the reason why I got into it in the first place was because of how I looked. It was because of body image issues. And I was really unhappy with the way I looked, obviously, up until now, because I was much chubbier. And through lifting and through all these athletic achievements, I found such positive changes in my body. I all of a sudden liked being a lot leaner than I was. I was hitting a weight that I'd always wanted to be my entire life. Like I had this idea that being 115 pounds or 120 or whatever it was like the ideal number. That if I hit that number and I had a six-pack or I had like muscle definition or I had these arms that weren't flabby and whatnot, that would be a lot more accepting of me, or a lot of people would suddenly approve of me, or I would actually get the guy of my dreams, or a lot of people would treat me a lot better because I actually looked really good. Mm-hmm. And I compared myself to a lot of other women. I remember in high school at an assembly sitting next to some other girl whose body I absolutely admired. And I remember looking at her legs on the chair and my legs on the chair, and her legs were so lean and thin, and my thighs were so fat that they were covering the entire chair. I was so sick of it. And now I actually love the fact that I have big thighs. So I got into lifting because of the way I looked, because I really wanted to change how my perception of my body was. But I'm finding that the compromises that I've had to make in order to stay down at a weight class, but in order to also get this body, is actually not healthy. And I think that's the problem is we think that our definition of health, I feel, is solely based on what we see on social media. We see constantly a lot of people posting images of them being super ripped, or maybe if they're not even remotely ripped, maybe they have like this really nice definition of like a thin waist, or they have these muscular thighs or these muscular arms and whatnot. And we're so comparing ourselves to what we see on social media, but we're never questioning whether or not that's actually the healthiest. And something that I've struggled or come across with lately is the toll that constantly cutting for meat and being down at the weight class that I am is taking on my health. So one of the things that I've been struggling with lately is the lack of a menstrual cycle. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that, so what I have right now that I've been diagnosed with is hypothalamic amenorrhea. And what that means is that the hypothalamus, so this part of your brain that controls your response to stress, that part of my brain right now is so focused on dealing with the stress of weightlifting, dealing with the stress of constantly monitoring my nutrition and having to deal with all these weight cuts, that it's not even worried about my reproductive cycle right now. And because of that, I don't have a menstrual cycle, which is concerning to me at the age of 29, because I want to have kids one day. I'm at that point where I'm about to reach 30. I'm going to have to start thinking about a family. But the compromises that I've made to become really good at weightlifting are taking away from my ability to do this, from my ability to just be a healthy female. And the true definition of health, we are on this earth here to reproduce, like that's the thing. Like females are meant to reproduce, and a sign of a healthy female body is the ability to reproduce. But my hormones right now are like really low, and I got them tested like a couple weeks ago. My progesterone and estrogen are like post-menopausal low. They are ridiculously low because of the constant stress that training, cutting, and everything has led. And because of that, like I have this I'm constantly battling myself of, do I want to try staying really good at weightlifting, or do I want to eventually have kids? And it's just made me realize or second guess like why I'm doing weightlifting in the first place. Is it worth doing weightlifting purely because you want to look a certain way, or do you want to do weightlifting for other reasons because of all the other positive benefits that come from it? Not just because of how you look, not just because of other people's perception of you or your accomplishments, but because of the happiness that coming into the gym day to day and just focusing on the cool challenges that come with lifting, just that aspect of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we appreciate you, sharing that with us. I think it's very difficult as someone who, I'm not a national level weightlifter at all. I'm not that great. But you watch all these people who have come into weightlifting and who kind of exploded in the sport, and they start to make these cuts to these weight classes, and you see it over and over, and every time it gets harder and harder for them, but they just chalk it up to, it's just the next time, or it's no big deal, or whatever. And abs buy sponsorships. Abs get you followers. But we neglect to look at, like, how healthy is that physically? How healthy is that mentally? Why are we trying to push these athletes into a box when someone who has to cut drastically to a 48 could probably explode into the 53s and really be just as fucking strong, but she's, 7 kilos or 5 kilos heavier. It's amazing how in this sport where we hear people talk a lot about be more, do more, you're strong, you're empowered, we still focus on, you're strong, but you don't have a six-pack, so like, well, I think are you even strong?
We have this connection with how you look demonstrates how good you are at the sport or how strong you are. I think that there's this connection where like you're not strong unless you looked absolutely ripped or whatnot, and that's not true. And the problem also that I see is everything that these top level lifters are posting are always their best. It's always their best lifts. We never see the day-to-day struggles or like the 98% of the rest of their day where it's not doing their best. You know, everyone always posts their best self on social media, and that's the problem, is we always see the best of everybody, and we're always comparing ourselves to that. And I think that's where we have to change our mindset. We have to stop comparing ourselves to I just totally lost my train of thought.
We have to stop comparing ourselves to the elite athletes who are showing us their highlight reel, and realize that real life does happen, and you're not going to have a six-pack. In fact,
but I don't think, you don't notice the compromises that you actually have to make in order to get to that level.
Right.
Because they're not, a lot of us have these day-to-day obligations that we have to do. We have full-time jobs. We can't have the luxury of just only doing weightlifting as a full-time thing and maybe like a little part-time side babysitting job just to make a little bit of extra money here. We don't have that luxury. And especially in other countries where literally right from birth, you go to school and then they basically put you into like the sport of weightlifting or in gymnastics or whatnot right from the get-go. Here in the US, it's so different, like our how we get our athletes to be where they are. And we don't have the luxury of being able to commit our entire life to focus on just weightlifting as a sport. There's so many compromises that we have to undergo in order to get to that level. And, at the end of the day, you just have to have fun with where you are in life. If you want to get to that level, if you want to be the American record holder or a world record holder or to make a medal, you have to do what no one else is doing. You can't go out that often every night and have fun with your friends, or you can't have that extra beer at the bar because you're watching your weight. And I definitely one time at like Thanksgiving, I had to watch what I was eating because the American Opens was like the next weekend, I couldn't just like relax and have fun anymore. And I don't think people realize that the sacrifices and the compromises that have to be made in order to get to that level. Yet we think it's all hunky-dory because everything that is being posted on social media from these athletes is always the PRs and is always like their best moments in the highlight reels. And it's never those struggles.
Their hashtag blessed moments.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's so important that you as a national level lifter are saying like, hey, look, if you're not getting your period anymore, that is a really big problem. And I think I see it in like nutrition forums all the time, people, and just recreational CrossFitters or weightlifters or powerlifters, people that aren't competing at a high level, that they're like obsessed with being super lean and they lose their period and they don't even realize that it's a problem. They're like, oh yeah, it's cool. It's no big deal. And it's like, even if you don't want to have children, it's still like, if that's not even something that's on your radar, that's still a signal that something is majorly wrong with your body and it's not okay. And I think that we need people that are high level lifters to stand up and say like, listen, this isn't okay and we can't accept this for our lives anymore, especially if if it's your career and you want to lay like your life and your future on the line for your weightlifting career, fine. But if you have other aspirations in life besides just being a weightlifter, like you can't be messing yourself up like this. And no one's talking about it. No one is saying like, this happened to me and this is a really big problem, that just everyone's allowing everyone to think that they're healthy and they're not. Like this is happening all over. This is a huge problem.
I think that's the thing with weightlifting, though, is, the whole issue with the female athlete triad and the whole overtraining, undereating thing. We see that more often in endurance sports and other sports like dancing and gymnastics. I think that's being talked about a lot more in those particular sports. But weightlifting, oh no, because these women are strong, because they have big muscles, because they have strong bones, because they're thicker. Nothing's ever wrong with them. And that's not true. I think because there's so much pressure. And you know what's difficult too is the whole idea of throw away the scale. You don't have to worry about your weight in order to be healthy, but weightlifting is a weight class based sport. And the problem with being weight class based is we fit ourselves into these categories and we feel we're not as successful unless we are around a certain weight. But the problem is the toll that it takes on our health because we have to fit into the certain number. We don't focus on just generally what it means to be healthy. Being healthy doesn't necessarily mean you have to be at a certain number. You have to lift a certain weight. You have to look a certain way. Being healthy is being able to have the energy to do whatever you want to do in life. At the end of the day, that's what it's all about. It's not about being the best or looking a certain way. It's having fun, being able to hike up a mountain if you want to, being able to bring you like all 10 bags of groceries all the time from your car inside. It's, it's about having fun day to day. And, with weightlifting, and I feel like in the US in particular, this is just my opinion, but we tend to be leaner for our height compared to other countries. Yes. I think Bob Takano has a chart out there that actually shows what weight you're supposed to be at for your height in particular. And I find that in America compared to other countries that we are leaner. That for somebody who's like 5 feet tall, technically I am supposed to be like a 53, but I feel like a lot of 53 lifters are a lot taller than me. They're like 5'2", 5'3", and so they're actually at a leaner musculature than what they should be compared to everyone else around the world.
Yeah. So now that that's all out of the way, what are you doing? So, okay, this is happening to one of our listeners. What are you currently doing to try to combat that? Are you eating more? Are you trying to reduce your stress? Like, what are some steps that you're taking to try to alleviate this issue?
Yeah, I mean, right now, I actually have accepted that I am not going to be a 53 for the rest of my life. One of the hardest things for me to do that I just did recently was tell my coaches, Greg and Amy, that for this American Open, I cannot lift as a 53. I have to lift as a 58. And my health at this moment and my ability to confidently have children in the future is so much more important to me right now than my performance, than trying to get a podium finish, than trying to prove myself to a lot of other people. And it comes back to the why. Why did I get into weightlifting? Is it because I'm trying to prove something to somebody else? Am I doing this because a lot of people look up to me for what I can do? Or am I doing this for myself? And I have to detach myself from trying to be as competitive or trying to be the best and really focusing on weightlifting as something fun that I love to do. And going to the gym and taking part in the sport because it's something that I'm passionate about as a hobby, as something for me to have fun at, not because of what other people's expectations are for me or for the way that I look. And so for me, I had to take a step up and say, like, you know what? I'm not going to care. I'm going to lift as a 58 at this meet. Just so I don't have to worry about the whole stigma of cutting to meet a certain class, of trying to hit the podium, or trying to like do something that in the long run is not going to really mean much to me, in the end. You could hit a medal one day and then the next year somebody else could podium and take that away from you. So like, what do? Like you have to find your reason why you're into the sport and know that I keep losing my train of thought.
That's okay. We do that all the time.
Yeah. But it's important to know your why, and it's important to understand that if your why is to go to the Olympics, then, I mean, it's going to come with its consequences. But if your why is not to go to the Olympics, or if your why is just because you love it, you really, as an athlete, have to step back and evaluate, okay, then what am I doing? Like, why am I jeopardizing my health for something that I just enjoy and I'm really good at, but I just enjoy,
Yeah, I mean, the reason why I do the sport now is because I love what it brings to me in the moment. I love the process of it now more so than I think I ever did before. And, again, back when I first got into weightlifting, I did it because of, it was how I looked, because of all the positive physical changes it brought to me. But now, like, I have to separate myself away from that because in the end, once I made it there, once you make it there, once you got the body that you've wanted, or once you're that certain weight, well, now what?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so what? Are you any better of a person? Do you feel that, like, people look up to you that much more because of that? Because it could all just, like, go away. You could, like, the next day, like, eat 5,000 calories and gain all the weight back and whatever. But so you have to find what is it about weightlifting or that sport that brings you back day to day that will keep you satisfied in the long run. And for me, it's really about that process. It's about the moment of making the lift right at that barbell right now, like in this very second that I'm going to pick up this barbell. Because, I could train for a big meet in 3 months, like the American Open, and totally bomb out, which I did one year. Like I completely bombed out. And if you're just always training for that one time of making the medal and you don't do it and you leave completely dissatisfied, well, what did you learn? Like what was it about training for that meet that was worth it? And it's really about the process of it. It's really about coming to the gym, those little challenges and those little accomplishments that you make day to day. And maybe it doesn't come to you every day. Like it's just the challenge of doing that I think is the why for me, and it makes it so fun.
I love that. I just think that it's so great that you're sharing your story and you're really bringing light to this. And just thank you for sharing it with us. So we have a final question for you, if you're ready.
Okay.
So Powered by Iron is all about how women's lives, their everyday lives, were changed directly or influenced by the iron or barbell, lifting weights, weightlifting. How has lifting changed your life, either physically, mentally, or even emotionally? How has the iron impacted you?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that it has done for me is allow me to just really think about a lot of the things that I do in life, especially like the why. And it's really given me a chance to think about, again, like just like, why do I do stuff? Like, do I do things because of other people, or do I do things because of myself, because of like the accomplishments and the challenges that I face and the goals that I achieve on my own, not just because of what other people's expectations are of me, or my parents' expectations, or my husband's expectations, or my coach's expectations, but really it's empowered me to feel like I can do something for myself and for my own, and just feel that sense of accomplishment day to day.
That's awesome.
I love that.
So, final question. What do you wish that the Snow now, what do you wish you knew back before you got into everything? What do you wish yourself now could tell yourself 5 years ago? What advice would you give her?
That the journey is never ending. That you could have a goal, 1 year down the line or 5 years down the line and hit that goal. And there's been so many of these. I've had goals of like eventually being a teacher one day, and I did that. Or eventually doing an Ironman triathlon one day, and I did that. Or, I guess making it to the American Opens or Nationals one day, and I did that. And these goals come by and they pass, and you have to keep finding new things to do. Because things come and go, like you can hit one goal and it's like, well, what do you do from there? Do you continue along that same journey, or do you pivot and find something else? And, like I thought that if I were to suddenly become a teacher, that was the career for me, that I would be so happy. I'm not a teacher anymore, like I do graphic design, or I'm going to do this Ironman triathlon one day. And now that's come and go, well, I'm like a weightlifter. I do something completely, totally different. And you can't be afraid to pivot and change what you want to do in life. It's like a lot of people try something, or they have a goal and they don't accomplish it. And because of that, they kind of are lost. They don't know what to do, or they just feel like they're such a failure. And I think you have to realize, like, you have the ability to change your direction where you are. What's happened has already happened in your life. There's nothing you can do about that in the past. But what you can do from this day forward, no matter how old you are, no matter where you are in life, is you can change the direction that you're going. And I've seen so many changes happen in my life where I thought I was going to do one thing, and a year later, I'm totally doing something different. And the place where I am right now, I would not have envisioned where I was going to be like 1 year ago, 5 years ago, I don't know, however many years ago. Just always be willing to change, be willing to work to something new. And it doesn't matter what you used to be or where you are now. Don't be afraid to go wherever things take you.
Oh my gosh.
That's very inspiring.
I
like that a lot. Well, Snow, tell our listeners where they can find you, because you've got a blog and you're on Instagram. So tell us.
And she's got a business.
Right. And you have a graphic design business.
I'm in way too many places. I need to start consolidating everything because I dilute myself too much. So I do run a blog right now, weightliftingwoman.com, although I'm very bad at posting a lot of stuff because I'm so busy doing everything else. Like my other side business, powersnowdesigns.com, or also on Etsy as well. So that's where I sell a lot of greeting cards, and it's about to get very busy with Christmas coming around the corner, or Hanukkah, or whatever holiday you celebrate. So I'm there at powersnowdesigns.com, weightliftingwoman.com are probably the two biggest places to find me. I'm also Powers of the Snow anywhere else, like on Instagram and Facebook.
Great.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for coming on today. We really appreciated it.
You have a very important message, and we're really happy to help spread that. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
All right. Until next week, guys. Bye.